I got this letter in the mail from the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. It says that my neighbor wants to discharge over 140,000 gallons of treated wastewater into the river every day, and I can make public comments if I want to. Well, that neighbor is Elon Musk and his companies, and I do happen to have some public comments. I'm Chap Ambrose in Bastrop, Texas. We're sitting about 25 miles east of Austin and a few thousand feet from the lower Colorado River. 2 years ago, Elon Musk and his companies began buying cow pastures and transforming this area into an industrial complex. So far, SpaceX and the Boring Company have built manufacturing facilities, but they have plans to build a neighborhood and have posted permits for a private club and a liquor license. So they have hundreds of acres, and I've got a hunch that they're not sure yet all that they're going to build. I want to start by telling you about 2 community meetings you're likely interested in if you're hearing this and in the Bastrop area. The big one is March 21st, 2023, and it's about this wastewater permit. It's hosted by that same agency, the TCEQ, and it's going to be at the Hampton Inn at 7 p.m. There will be representatives from TCEQ as well as the Boring Company. This meeting was required because we were able to petition our local state senator, and they made the request for it. The other meeting is 2 weeks earlier, hosted by a grassroots group I'm a part of, and that will be on March 8th, 6 p.m. at the Bastrop Public Library. We will share more of our research and discuss these issues before the state meeting. If you live nearby and have any interest in this topic, I encourage you to show up. I'd love to meet you in person. I'd love you to bring 2 friends along. So far, there are over 150 public comments on the TCEQ website regarding this permit, and you can read all those online and anyone can submit it. These are mostly from concerned individuals, but I want to highlight one from the city of Bastrop opposing the permit. They want the company to tie into the city public system where they already have capacity instead of building this standalone facility. Their argument is that it's better if we collect wastewater into larger centralized plants instead of many smaller ones. You can see that in the Texas Water Code. It says to encourage and promote the development and use of regional and area-wide waste collection. But the truth is, I'm a newbie when it comes to development and infrastructure and environmental design. What I am the world's expert in is living in my house. And I am the expert on what it's like to live next to these companies and try and work with them as their neighbor. Unfortunately, it's not great. They've broken promises to us, and they continue to ignore state laws that protect the health and safety of my family. Outside the city limits, Texas has very few laws about what you can do with your property. The few restrictions we do have are put in place specifically to protect from development that goes past a property line. And so we're talking about the basics like water, air, safe entry and exit. That's all we got. I've been digging in to understand these laws and understand the system and understand exactly how these decisions about my neighborhood are being made. I've been submitting public information requests for government records and documents to try and figure out how this goes down behind the scenes. What I'm seeing in these public documents, how these companies treat the government, mirrors the exact same issues that we've had on the ground as neighbors. To put it bluntly, they don't do what they're supposed to do. They don't do what regulators tell them to do. And fundamentally, they don't do what they say they're going to do. So when people ask why I'm concerned about this permit, my honest response is to ask what gives them the confidence that they will follow the terms of this permit when they haven't done that in the past. And all I have to go on is the behavior that I've seen over the last 2 years with my own eyes and what I've found documented in these public records. For the first year they were here, it was easy to assume that they're not doing anything wrong, and it was easy to assume that we have laws that protect water and all that. But what I've learned is there are laws. These companies are not following them. Every regulatory agency that has an interest here is struggling to get these companies to follow the law. And so I'm going to walk through that. But first, let's start with some good things about Mr. Musk. I got my Starlink satellite dish from SpaceX. I think it's a really good option if you don't have any hardwire internet. I work from home, so my connection is very important. The other good news, and I think I'm the first person to report this, is that the Boring Company donated $30,000 to the county of Bastrop. Why $30,000? Well, that is the amount of the material cost to pave the county road alongside their property, and it's that county road that we share between us. I appreciate that they're using their money to improve the neighborhood. I sincerely think it's a good example of a company stepping up to make required infrastructure improvements instead of expecting taxpayers to kick in. They stepped up, they paid for it to happen. I found this cost breakdown for that road in a public information request with the county, but I found a lot more. In my first video, I detailed how we were able to have their initial warehouse proposal tabled at the end of February 2022, mostly because they hadn't built a legal septic system. But going back through the county's emails, you can see that wastewater has been an issue from the start. And a day after court, they did get a warning from Bastrop's Director of Engineering and Development. After that warning, they actually did get a violation for their septic system, and the county gave them a 60-day grace period to fix it. But after that 60 days were up, they still hadn't fixed the original violation, and they received a second notice of violation. So this is how the company acts. After months of planning with the county, warnings from inspectors, our public comments at Commissioner's Court, and a violation with a grace period that allows you to fix it. They don't do that. And there's actually this pretty candid email from the Director of Development to another commissioner detailing the trouble that they've had working with the company. He says, "We have been regularly hounded by their staff and consultants to expedite and approve permit applications that are incomplete and not in compliance with Commissioner's Court regulations." One of the challenges here is that because there is this long lag in requesting public documents, and sometimes it could be months if the Attorney General needs to approve a redaction, in real time you're relying on the filtered information from your local representative and any press who may be doing some digging. Sure enough, there was a journalist digging around on these permitting issues, and an interview with my county commissioner was published. And he said, "Boring Co. has been well within county regulations every time officials have met with the company or have been on site." In retrospect, with the public documents, we have more context. And this article was actually published May 6th, which puts it squarely between the violation they first received in March and the second they would get in May. But not only did my commissioner say they've never had any issues with the county, he's directly quoted as saying, "I don't think TCEQ is going to find anything." Right there, underneath the headline. Guess what? He was wrong again. So let's talk about TCEQ. They're focused on protecting the environment, and specifically when development reaches a certain scale. For example, if you move more than an acre of dirt, they have rules. And if your wastewater discharge goes above 5,000 gallons a day, TCEQ has to approve it, not the county. And we can look at the initial wastewater permit with the county. You can see it was just under that limit, 4,840. In the first year of development out here, TCEQ wasn't involved at all. But when they did come, as is tradition, they got two more violations. One for not getting a pollution discharge permit, and the other for letting stormwater run unprotected off their property. This same agency that they now need approval on for their wastewater. And they're the ones hosting that public meeting on March 21st to discuss expanding beyond the county limits from that 4,000 up to 140,000. But that won't be the end of their wastewater, because in the time this application was submitted, SpaceX bought the underlying property from the boring company across the street and built a new facility. And whatever they end up doing in there, it will have wastewater. And this current permit has no mention of anything going across the street. It's only for tunnel manufacturing and domestic wastewater. I expect to continue to invest and develop this area, and we'll see complementary businesses and more housing come alongside it. You can start to see that wider view and why the city's suggestion of extending service out here is really the best option. And from my discussion with experts, it's only a matter of time before that happens. I can all but guarantee they will continue to receive violations from TCEQ. 4 months ago, I submitted a report to the TCEQ because it looked like they had actually removed the stormwater protections that they had been required to put in place from the first violations. I also sent along this video of them blatantly pumping their stormwater over the silt fence without any kind of protection. I don't know much, but I know you can't do that. And I'm still waiting to read that report, and I will let you know as soon as I get it. But the blatant carelessness is no more evident than their dealings with the Texas Department of Transportation, TxDOT. In my last video, I mentioned that they didn't have a permit for their driveway, but I've since learned That's because they ignored TxDOT advice on where it should be built. And if you start going through the emails, you see that they've been talking to TxDOT about a driveway since before they purchased the property. April 20th, they were sent TxDOT's commercial access packet, which includes all the regulations and requirements for driveways in Texas. A few months later in July, after they had purchased the property, they submitted an application for the driveway. And 2 days later, TxDOT responded with corrections. The plans didn't follow the law, and the driveway was too narrow, was placed too close to an existing road, and didn't follow guidelines for stormwater. That's when they started pushing back against TxDOT, trying to explain why the rules didn't apply to them. While negotiations on that permit continued, TxDOT discovered that they had already built the driveway, and it included all the safety violations that it had been warned about in the initial plan and that initial packet. TxDOT's deputy district engineer had to get involved and explain the rules again laid out in that packet. And he quotes, "With the decision to construct this driveway with no permit or approval at the location chosen, all liability is on the boring company at this time." Then more TxDOT engineers get involved. TBC responds with more details on why they don't need to follow the rules. I think the funniest is probably here when they say they're okay if their driveway floods due to poor planning. If a significant storm event generates flooding that renders TBC's driveway unusable, TBC has the ability to postpone deliveries through the private drive. They explain that they don't need all the necessary safety spacing because deliveries are, quote, typically performed by drivers who are familiar with the site. Well, that's not true based on my experience. And I was out there just this Friday talking with a frustrated delivery driver who was unfamiliar with the site and trying to do things safely. But their design simply does not allow that. Ultimately, TxDOT lawyers got involved and the area engineer wrote to them, "If we do not receive the traffic control plan, then we have been directed to barricade the driveway." Even after all those discussions, all the back and forth, literally a year since they received the rules on how a driveway needed to be designed, TxDOT finally granted them what's in there as a temporary driveway permit for this, what was an illegal driveway. Part of that plan was that they had to install warning signs and that they could only use the driveway as an exit. They did put up the warning signs, but they're not just using the driveway as an exit. One morning, I sat out there and counted 23 cars entering through that driveway in a 1 hour period. And if you look at my video, again, from this Friday, a full-size tractor trailer trying to get through that driveway, it just can't happen safely. Looking at this temporary permit with variances that they finally did get, TxDOT has some language on when exceptions can be justified. A significant negative impact to the owner's real property or its use will likely result from the denial of its request for the variance, including the loss of reasonable access to the property or undue hardship on a business located in the property. So there it is in black and white. This company knew precisely what the law was and did not follow it. And instead of begging for forgiveness and working to correct their safety hazard, they told us it'll negatively impact their business if they're required to follow the law. This angers me, and I question if enough consideration had been given to the fact that they have 3 other legal driveways that they could use to access their property. And I understand the need to move fast. My business is software, and I've worked in startups, and I know there is a ticking clock to prove to investors that they are going to make money. And I've worked in companies whose culture is to move fast and break stuff, but that doesn't work with infrastructure, and that doesn't work with water protections. And once you break the trust of your neighbors, it's going to be at a snail's pace that you earn it back. So let's bring it back full circle. That's why this wastewater permit is such a big deal and why I'm so concerned about it. At every opportunity, this company has let their financial interests trump the concerns and safety of the community. And they made it perfectly clear that they will break the laws that protect our land, our water, and our people if they decide it's financially necessary. But with this wastewater permit, Elon has another chance. His companies have another choice. They can do the right thing. They can work with the community. They can work with the city. They can build lasting infrastructure that will support the explosion of growth that they kicked off. Or they won't. I'm focused solely on what I can do and what my community can do together. And I'm telling you, we are going to clean up that river. And Mr. Musk, you can either join us and help us in that effort, or we're going to do it in spite of you. Thank you so much for listening. Please consider coming out to these meetings March 21st and March 8th, 2023. I also accept anonymous tips on my website. I'm happy to track down any environmental, ethical, or safety concerns. Industry experts also submit great information to me there. And I'm starting to publish all these public documents I got. Let me know if you see something I missed. Please keep me honest to what I've said here. I'm going to post more and more as I have time to go through and redact things that the government missed. I want to end by just talking directly to my neighbors, the employees at the boring company, SpaceX, anybody working on site. My frustration is not with you. I care about you. I'm glad you're here. Welcome. But we need your leadership to step up.
California is a garden of Eden, a paradise to live in or see. But believe it or not, you won't find it so hot if you ain't got